Hi guys, WineTuber here, and in today's video I'm going to talk about what is the difference between vintage and non-vintage wine. What is the difference between vintage and non-vintage champagne? Also, what is the difference between vintage and non-vintage port? So, let's find out! If you are wondering what vintage means on the bottle of wine, the simple answer is that vintage is the year which the grapes were harvested. On the other hand, non-vintage wines can be made from the grapes that were harvested in different years. What means good vintage? Well, good vintage is when the weather conditions are ideal to produce healthy and fully ripe grapes, as there are many hazards during wine growing seasons, like for example heat, and wine can be very jammy and quite alcoholic, like for example rain before the harvest, and grapes can be completely dilute, or hailstorm or spring frost, an entire crop could be completely gone. Here are perfect examples. This bottle of Chateau La Mission Aubryon 2011 cost €470. But the same bottle from Outstanding Vintage, which was 2000, cost €1,000 per bottle. The main difference between vintage and non-vintage champagne is that the vintage champagne is aged for minimum 3 years before its release, which is non-vintage champagne, it's aged for 50 months. But the other difference between those two wines that is that vintage champagne is made from the grapes that the year is declared on the label, which non-vintage champagne is the most common type of champagne. They are a blend of base wine with several years to create the style of each house. Generally speaking, vintage champagnes are more expensive than non-vintage. They have more complexity and longer aging potential. Please know that many champagne houses are producing their vintage champagne or the top cuvée only from the greatest vintages, like for example 1996, 2002, 2008, 2013 or 2015. Before I explain the difference between vintage and non-vintage port, you should also know that there are two main types of port, ruby and tawny. Ruby ports are definitely darker in color as they age in large barrels for short periods of time to preserve youthful flavor, which is tawny ports are aged for longer periods of time in small barriques, and during this process wine is going through micro-oxidations. This is why tawny port are paler in color and have more dry fruits and nutty flavors. If you'd like to learn more about the differences between ruby and tawny port, click the link here or one in the description below, as I made a separate video about the differences between those two wines. Unlike the other regions or appellations, the majority of port wines are made each year as non-vintage. Port houses are blending wines from different years, different parcels, also different grape varieties. Non-vintage ports are usually inexpensive and fantastic value for money. Fun fact, did you know that over 95% of port wines are labeled as non-vintage? On the other hand, vintage ports are one of the finest wine produced in Portugal and made only from the finest years, called also classic vintage, and aged in wood barrels before are released. There are two types of port. Vintage port, which is a ruby style and is aged in wood for 2 years before its release, and colheita, which is a tawny style of port and is aged in wood for minimum 7 years or longer. Generally speaking, vintage or colheita ports are quite expensive, so if you're looking for really good value for money ports, I highly recommend Reserve Tawny or LBV, which it stands for Late Bottled Vintage, and this is one of the best value for money ruby style of port. As you can see, there are many fantastic non-vintage wines available on the market, like champagne and other sparkling wines like cava or franciacorta, also ruby, tawny port, madeira and sherries. But keep one thing in mind: if you're doing your shopping at the supermarket, avoid the cheapest still wines on the shelf, as in most cases these wines are the lowest in quality. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. By the way, don't miss out my next one about how to pronounce top 10 most planted grape varieties in France. So stay tuned, don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time!